Ole Miss is trending for Deuce Knight, the Notre Dame commit, even as official visit month is getting ready to officially kick off.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Thank you very much for joining us. Today on the show, we talk about Deuce Knight being in the news as David Johnson of 247 crystal balled the Elite 11 quarterback to the Ole Miss Rebels. That's not the only quarterback in the news. Keelon Russell basically says that he's committed to SMU until he isn't, as the Rebels continue to hang around in that recruitment. And Ole Miss is expecting around 4 official visitors over the weekend, including a Tennessee Volunteers commit. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available in all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is. July 2nd at 7 p.m. Central Time, you can join us at Walk-Ons in Ridgeland, Mississippi for a meet and greet. It'll be the first time that I've done a meet and greet in Mississippi. I'm sure it will be a ton of fun, and this is an opportunity for the Loom community to grow. Also, the Rebel Road Trip is sponsored by Dead Soxy. They'll be in Corinth, Mississippi, June 13th at 6 o'clock at the Crossroads Arena. There's still time also to join the Grove Collective and help Ole Miss football be elite. You can go to thegrovecollective.com and join today. This is an interesting situation, all right? We have a point where we're getting ready to start the June period. There's 2 really slow months, just so everybody knows, in this business. February, for whatever reason, is a very slow month. The second one is June. Those are probably the 2 slowest months on the calendar. So I have to look at how I can attack this month. And there's a chance that I will go in and be like, very much for the hardcore fan. If there's only going to be 1,000 people watching the videos on YouTube, maybe this will be a more hardcore type thing. Or will it be more granular to where I try to pick people up as well from the outside to watch these videos? We'll see how it goes. I'm kind of leaning towards being a little bit more dedicated for the next month to the hardcore fan and talk about some of the things that they're interested in. We'll see exactly how it goes. All right. Deuce Knight is a current Notre Dame football commit, and he's saying all the right things when it comes to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. He is a 4-star quarterback, an Elite 11 quarterback. If you look at his RPM, that recruit prediction machine, that's basically an algorithm essentially. So it's based off the number of stories that go out about that. Ole Miss is still less than 10 points behind Notre Dame, who he's committed to. And Ole Miss is just hanging around with this prospect out of Lucedale, Mississippi. He's currently a top 50-ish player on the consensus. I think he's 53rd. He's the number 7 quarterback in the country, the number 3 player in the state of Mississippi, behind Caleb Cunningham and a Kylan Deere. He's 6'4.5", 200 pounds. He's committed to Marcus Freeman and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Currently, they hired Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator that has been Jaden Daniels' new quarterback. And shocker, anytime you have a good player, the next player is exactly like the other one. So Denbrock is comparing Deuce Knight to Jaden Daniels. I think Deuce Knight favors more comparably to like Lamar Jackson. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Now, the reason he is in the news is because On3 is hosting their own, some kind of an elite convention thing. Basically, it's a place to where you can get elite prospects in one place where On3 can interview them, and they can do it under the guise of something else. And they're doing it under the guise of an NIL program. On3 has made no secret over the last year or two that they wanted to be at the top of the NIL space. This is just another example of that. But players like Keelon Russell and Deuce Knight, they're available. They're being interviewed all the time. And Deuce Knight, while he says he's committed to Notre Dame, he actually said that the clear number 2 is Ole Miss, and that Ole Miss is on him, and he's intrigued by staying home in his state of Mississippi and putting on for Ole Miss and helping them reach the next level. Deuce Knight is also a quarterback that transferred up to a powerhouse in Lipscomb Academy in Nashville. But it turned out it didn't really work out for him. He got a little bit homesick. And then before the football season ended, he came back home to George County and Lucedale. I think Deuce Knight is going to have a pretty terrific year this year. And Ole Miss is about to fight for these top 3 prospects that are all top 50 type prospects in the nation. Number 1 is Caleb Cunningham. He is a 6'4", 6'5" wide receiver from Choctaw County. Really, really good football player. It's going to be an Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Potentially, I think Alabama is probably going to get in there with him. They're going to be recruited by everybody, but there's just the feeling that this might be an in-state type deal. Kylan Deere is already committed to Ole Miss, and the third person on the list is Deuce Knight. Lane Kiffin is on him all the time. Charlie Weiss is recruiting his butt off, trying to get this guy to Ole Miss. Deuce Knight is scheduled to, I think, officially visit Notre Dame on the 14th of June. I right off the top of my head, I don't know if he's official to Ole Miss. I'm expecting him potentially to do it because he didn't rule out taking other visits as well. You have 6 months from now until signing day that Notre Dame has to hold serve, and the gap from where Deuce Knight wants to go is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, which means Deuce Knight, he tends to be listening to what is going on. He is a really electric football player. Don't let his height kind of throw you off. He can legit run. He can legit jump. He is the best athlete on every single field he has stepped on. You're looking at somebody that probably has a 40-inch vertical jump, can run a 4.4 40. He's 6'5" tall. He is a super athlete. Notre Dame is going to have to fight like the Dickens to hold off Ole Miss in this recruitment, because if you want to look at this, Ole Miss has a unique quarterback predicament right now that they are in, and they don't need to sign a 2025 quarterback. Let me go ahead and say that they do not need to do it. The opportunity for 2 Elite 11 quarterbacks that Ole Miss being in the game with, we're going to talk about Keelon Russell in the next segment. But Deuce Knight's a top 50 player. Ole Miss is in the game with this quarterback as well. Those plays at quarterback, that they can big game hunt a little bit, okay? They can understand how this is going to shape in the future, because Ole Miss going into the 2025 season, you're going to have a year 2 of eligibility with Austin Simmons potentially, or a year 3 of eligibility of Walker Howard. You're going to have AJ Maddox, who's on campus as well. Whoever probably loses the Austin Simmons Walker Howard battle is probably going to transfer out. So whoever is going to be the quarterback, the starter will either be Walker Howard or Austin Simmons, and the backup will be AJ Maddox, and the third quarterback will either be potentially Deuce Knight or Keelon Russell. That's the way this is set up. And Ole Miss realizes how deep this this quarterback room is for Ole Miss at the moment. And because of that, they probably don't have to sign a high school player this recruiting cycle. I think if you don't get Deuce Knight, if you don't get Keelon Russell, which right now, if you look at the RPMs on them, they're both scheduled. Their other schools are coming up on top. If you don't get either one of them, I think you sign a backup quarterback in the transfer portal, just somebody that if disaster happens in 2025, you can at least put this person in and he can be competent. I don't think that you sign a high school quarterback unless it is Deuce Knight or Keelon Russell. I think those are the 2 main players that Ole Miss has to deal with. And like I said, I call it a quarterback quandary, but it's actually a quarterback benefit, essentially. The deepness and the talent that they have built in their quarterback room allows them a little bit of flexibility to where you can really, truly big game hunt with somebody like Deuce Knight or Keelon Russell. Or you just find somebody in the background, the in case of emergency break glass quarterback, and get ready for the 2026 cycle, which Ole Miss is already in on several 2026 quarterbacks as well. All right, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. Deuce Knight is not the only quarterback Ole Miss is recruiting, and that guy had an interesting quote yesterday. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. They have views from all the seats in your venue. Lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, all of the customer service bells and whistles this company has. You can take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that screaming and shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Deuce Knight getting crystal balled by David Johnson from Inside the Rebels at 247 and all of the quotes happening at the On3 Elite thing, that's going to get a lot of the news, okay? And just because he got crystal ball, that doesn't mean anything 6 months out. It lets you know that this is trending in that direction. But the other quarterback that Ole Miss is recruiting is Keelon Russell. He's a quarterback out of Duncanville, Texas. And when you look at what he does and what he has, he's another consensus 4-star, top 70 football player in the country, number 11 player in the state of Texas. He is slated to go to SMU, but he had this interesting quote yesterday. It says he caught up with Steve Wiltfong prior to starting his day on Wednesday. He says, "My recruitment is still open. I'm just waiting to see a college who can really flip me. If not, SMU is home. I feel like SMU is where I want to be, and SMU is where I want to go. SMU is looking like a great future. We're getting top dudes. I looked at the other day, we're like number 25 in the class of 2025, and we're most likely building at SMU, but there are schools like Bama, Oregon, Florida that have chances to flip me. That's where I'm at right now." That's an interesting quote. Ole Miss is involved. He's already official to Oxford. He's already seen that. And he basically just said, though, I'm committed until SMU, until I'm not. And he said it with the full confidence of something like that's a real thing. But what that quote actually said, if we want to break down what was said in that Keelon Russell quote, it's like, hey, I needed to secure a space on a roster where I want to go. I need to go and get my safety school and lock that down so it can truly be a safety school, and then I can go out and shop. If none of those match what the other ones are doing, what SMU has, I will go to SMU. But if one of them does, I will say thank you, SMU, and move on to something greener and better. It really interesting quote there. And Ole Miss is not going away with Keelon Russell. I think Ole Miss is going to recruit Deuce Knight like crazy. I think Ole Miss is going to, honestly, that's probably going to be their priority. If you ask me, my opinion entirely, I have no say in it, but I do think Deuce Knight is the number one option for Ole Miss football right now. The number two option is Keelon Russell. And they brought Keelon in for an official visit. They probably are keeping this situation as warm as they humanly possibly can. But they are going to try and work Deuce Knight until they absolutely can't get Deuce Knight. And you've got 6 months essentially until signing day. And you have camp season that I guarantee you in the 7-on-7 camps, that one will probably be George County or something like that. Deuce Knight will probably end up camping at one of them, something like that. And he will put on his best opportunity to get back to Oxford. He spent a ton of time in Oxford, by the way. He hasn't taken an official visit. He probably needs to take an official visit for you to take it serious, but I don't think he's taken an official visit yet. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, Deuce Knight is due at Notre Dame on July 14th. I don't expect any closure anytime soon on this one, but we will see what happens, because what Deuce Knight decides to do, in my opinion, directly affects Keelon Russell. It's not a first one to commit, first one to jump on the boat, you take over the other one. It feels like there's a little bit of a tier system developing in this one. And like I said, if Ole Miss doesn't get either one of them, Ole Miss probably needs to just take somebody in the transfer portal that's an in case of emergency break glass guy and move on to the 2026 class. I don't think Ole Miss needs to take a quarterback in 2025 to take a quarterback. If they do not have the guy, they probably do not need to take a quarterback just to take one. My opinion there. Also, before we move on to the official visits in the next segment, I do want to keep all those together, but we have a couple of minutes here. And the athletic director, Scott Stricklin from Florida, was directly asked about Florida State in the SEC. Now, he did not answer that question directly, but he did say something very interesting. From that answer, Florida is not going to block Florida State if Florida State tries to get into the SEC. So anybody that says Florida State will not allow them to come in, that doesn't appear to be true, okay? Just by this answer. Now, that said, he said that nobody in the SEC has veto power. That doesn't exist. Veto power does not exist in the SEC. All you need is a 2/3 vote, which is roughly 11 out of 16. You need 11 votes out of 16 votes for expansion to make it in. Florida State would probably earn that. I do think personally, and there's going to be some people watching this video that does not agree with me. And I understand that, and that's fine. I get that. But I do want to see 2 teams in South Carolina, 2 teams in Georgia, 2 teams in Florida, 2 teams in Louisiana, 2 teams in Arkansas, if there was another team in Arkansas. Because I don't think anybody should have a situation like LSU's a really good team because they don't have to worry about anybody else. If you can dilute that talent base a little bit, it makes Ole Miss and Mississippi State a little bit more viable of a team in the Southeastern Conference. Alabama and Auburn's good teams. You can be good teams and have 2 teams in the same state. Tennessee and Vanderbilt, Ole Miss and State, all of them, they shouldn't be at a disadvantage because other teams don't. Like Texas A&M is really, really angry that Texas is coming into the league, and that is because they were the only SEC school in the state of Texas, and that was giving them an advantage. You have that. LSU has an advantage. Arkansas, believe it or not, has an advantage. Florida has an advantage. South Carolina, they can be a joke, but you remember when Steve Spurrier was there, they can turn it around pretty quickly, and Williams-Brice is an incredibly difficult place to play. I think Florida State and Clemson coming into the SEC, that would eliminate that by putting 2 teams in each of those states. I do think that Tulane, they should bring that back in. I think Georgia Tech should be brought back in. And that's just my opinion on that. It just is what it is. Anyway, But yeah, that was the main thing out of Destin. I think the other thing is they asked Lane Kiffin is like, who's the leader of the coaches in the football room now that Nick Saban has retired? And I think Lane Kiffin said Kirby Smart is that coach at the moment. So that is interesting at the very least. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. Official visit month, June, is about to get underway, and we talk about who Ole Miss is bringing in week 1. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Locked On Sports Today is now available in the free Fire TV Channels app. Be part of history. All right, so we talked 2025 quarterbacks for the better part of like 20 minutes. So that's pretty cool. I talked earlier about wanting to kind of drill down a little bit and make this more of a show for the hardcores in June. And I think we kind of did that in the first couple of segments. This is the first weekend of official visits for Ole Miss in this June cycle. And just so everybody knows, it's not happening this year, but it will happen in the future to where a June signing day is going to come up. So you're going to have this June month is going to become the new December. Okay. If you think about all the official visits that happened in December, June is going to become that month, and they're going to commit and sign before their season, which means you're going to see high school players opting out. Honestly, if we're going to be real about that, high school players opting out is a thing that's going to happen, but that's beside the point altogether. Ole Miss is bringing in 4 official visitors in this first weekend. Dylan Williams, a defensive back out of Demopolis, Alabama. He's 6'2", 180. He's a long guy. He has only been rated by 24/7 Sports. This is an eval official visit that was given out by Pete Golding. So before everybody has an opinion on this, realize that Ole Miss is probably leading on the RPM right now, 44%. Number 2 is Mississippi State at 16.8, Kentucky at 3 at 14.4, and Cincinnati's at 12% as well. You're going to see a couple of safeties visit this trip. I think there's a strategery, you might say, with Pete Golding and how they bring in players this weekend as well. Keelon Young is another safety. We talked about him yesterday. He is a Florida decommit, I think. If you look at the RPM, 94.3 Florida. Florida's not in the final 3. The final 3 is USF, Ole Miss, and Kentucky. I think Ole Miss is in good shape there. Keelon Young has visited Ole Miss recently, unofficially. He's going to come in for an official visit. I think if it goes well, Ole Miss will probably be on a commit watch with Keelon Young. He is a player that plays for the Lakeland Dreadnoughts. I do think that is the best nickname in all of sports. And when you look at his highlights, just like pick six after pick six, excellent ball skills. He's somebody that has a chance to be really good, and he's a guy that I foresee being an all-SEC level player by the time he is a junior, maybe even before that as well. Now, if you look at the next one, you have Taryn Hedrick. He's somebody, it says out of Columbia, Missouri, but he went to Community School of Naples, and I think that might be Naples, Florida. But I'm not 100% sure on that, because if you look at the RPM, Florida, again, at 25% is number 1. Number 2, though, is Purdue. And then you have Ole Miss and Kentucky. Offensive lineman, 6'5", 305. Probably a tackle-type player. Really, really good football player. And if you look at the end, Redarius Jackson, a wide receiver out of Memphis, Tennessee. He's 6'2", 180. He's committed to Tennessee. Redarius, I think there was a radar that was at Horn Lake with N'Kobe Dean. This feels like that. But he is somebody that is committed to Tennessee. He's visiting Ole Miss. This is a visit that you just try to open the door a little bit farther, because right now, obviously, with him being committed, the door is fairly shut. I mean, it's going to be hard to get in, but we'll see how it goes. Whenever you look at the wide receivers, you have Caleb Cunningham that Ole Miss is trying to get in the game with and have, but you have Dylan Alford, player out of Saraland, Alabama, wide receiver. Excellent player. You have Jerome Miles, who is a 5-star type wide receiver out of Utah. So the wide receiver positions at a minimum have a chance to be extremely explosive for the 2025 class. And you look at who Ole Miss has talent-wise in the quarterback room, like I said, that's at a very least interested. So this Rodarius needs to be, I don't know, you're trying to get the door open a little bit farther. You're trying to get it situated. Rodarius Jackson, I meant to say. But you can see he's a 4-star player on all 4 sites. He's a top 100 player on On3. He's a top 250 player on Rivals, and he's not in the top 247 or ESPN's top 300. But really, really good ball player. Interesting type stuff. Hey, let me know in the comments, do you think I should spend June for the hardcores? Do you want to go in, not necessarily in the weeds? I mean, I don't necessarily want to get into personnel and drawing up plays and all that, but stuff that is genuinely designed for the hardcore type fans. Like us talking about the quarterback situation going in the 2025 year. What would be a June that you would be interested in? Now, July, once we get back from the meet and greet, it's completely go time on the 2024 season. You know, we are going to be ready to go. So 6 weeks from right now, we are going to be, it's to the top, to the moon. We are going to go. But over the course of the next month or so, now there's a week that we're going to take off for vacation. There's going to be a week that we take off for the meet and greet. So it's 3 weeks. Let me know if what you want for content reasons. We'll see exactly how that goes. Should be pretty cool. Should be really cool. Oh, and thank you very much. We went over 7,000 YouTube subscribers over yesterday. And that's the first Ole Miss podcast to go over 7,000 YouTube subscribers. We're the number 1 podcast out there, and we thank you for that. Really, really good stuff indeed. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first and listen every day. We have the most perspective surrounding Ole Miss sports, and it's one of the many reasons why we are the number 1 Ole Miss podcast, and thank you for that. This week's top 5 topic is the top 5 wins in Ole Miss history, and you might get to hear my list tonight. But for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today is the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available in the free Fire TV Channels app. And for those of you on YouTube, we will send you there right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.